You mentioned this is what drew a lot of people to Trump and Bernie Sanders, and I think that's exactly right. And then under Trump, things did get better. I don't think that's disputable. We just had Jason Riley on the show not long ago, writer for the Wall Street Journal, and he was writing in particular about how one of the untold stories of the Trump presidency was the extent to which Black economic fortunes improved and just lower, working class, sort of lower educated, more working class workers' lot improved. This is from an article he wrote in the Wall Street Journal January 28th, but he has a book out called Black Boom. He is Black. And he writes, over the first 3 years of Mr. Trump's presidency, Blacks and Hispanics experienced record low rates of unemployment and poverty, while wages for workers at the bottom of the income scale rose faster than they did for management. And he goes on to say that part of what made the Trump boom unique was who benefited the most. The economy grew in ways that mostly benefited low-income and middle-class households, categories that cover a disproportionate number of Blacks. He writes, between 2017 and 19, median household incomes grew 15.4% amongst Blacks, just 11.5% amongst whites. I realize you're not making this a racial issue. I just think it's interesting. And then he says the investment bank Goldman Sachs released a paper in March 2019 that showed pay for those at the lower end of the wage distribution rising at nearly double the rate of pay for those at the upper end. Average hourly earnings were growing at rates that hadn't been seen in almost a decade. CNBC reporting that the bottom half of earners are benefiting more than the top half under the Trump presidency. In fact, about twice as much. So to me, that's very interesting. I'm not a number cruncher or a math person, but this, I think, is why Trump wound up doing so well with those groups electorally, despite some of his rhetoric, is that they did feel an improvement under him. Wasn't perfect, but it was an improvement. Do you agree with that?
I mean, I think like under any administration, it's always like a mixed bag, right? Because I think, so first, yeah, there were, plenty of workers at those lower tiers who did see kind of wage growth, which was awesome. I don't care who does it. If that's the case, I'm all for it, right? But at the same time, I think that one facet to that is very much bipartisan, right, is, as I said, after the 2008 financial crash and then the long recession, inequality continued to sort of skyrocket. Workers were very much left to flounder. So like their wages going up, their working conditions improving a bit is awesome. But like they were coming from a very low point and they still had a lot of ground to make up, which I think is also why you saw a lot of strikes at this point. So like the strike wave, quote unquote, that we had last year during COVID-19, it's important for folks to remember that it's not like strikes just happened right then. Like there were strikes going on before the pandemic, like the Red for Ed movement, where you had teachers in red states and blue states, like from California to Oklahoma, launching these massive strikes saying we have been underfunded and understaffed and our resources have been gutted for decades. We are not able to do our job and serve our children and our communities the way that we can. We're losing teachers. And so they struck, right? And they actually won a lot of huge gains, which is awesome. Right. At the same time, like folks did get a tax break. That's great. But that also just supercharged kind of inequality. The 1% is running just, universes ahead of us. So that's a very much a long running problem that anyone on the Republican or Democratic side is going to have to figure out how to do something about it because it's a really, really big problem. But the other thing that I think is really significant, Megyn, that if anyone like does refuse to acknowledge this, they are being dishonest. But like something happened during the COVID-19 pandemic that was really paradigm changing, right? It started under Trump's administration, carried over for a bit into Biden's administration. But unlike the 2008 recession, where the establishment essentially threw its arms around the banks and big capital and protected them at all costs, while the rest of us were left, like to our own devices. And we've spent the past decade really trying to make up that loss before COVID-19 hit. Unlike that time, we actually experienced something incredible where the government injected money directly into people's pockets with the stimulus checks, with the child care benefits and the unextended employment benefits. Like we saw massive even historic drops in poverty levels, because in large part because of this government aid, which was incredible. And now, unfortunately, we're sort of seeing the ruling class claw it all back by jacking up prices and rents. Inflation, over the past year has already outpaced the wage growth that happened last year. And so like whatever gains like workers are making year by year are important, but in the grander scheme of things, we still have a very, very long way to go.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.